as there are more number of presentations, so I will straight away go with the presentation. So far it was the redevelopment of individual building under 33(7). So I would just like to mention here, because the planners are over here. It might be with the intention of cornering that particular redevelopment of individual buildings which are not being in the good test for the city in future, by way of such kind of regulation, open space criteria, parity of FSI and parity of other regulations, with an intent that people should come together, form a bigger cluster, and then there will be a better redevelopment of the island city of Mumbai. But then, sir, the problems are same in cluster redevelopment also. So from that perspective, please give it a thought for our presentation, because if individual redevelopment is to be not to be desired, then cluster redevelopment should be more attractive and should be workable. So, and then another part is, sir, we have read the regulation, the draft regulation, to some extent the report also, not completely, and probably when we are trying to unlock certain things out of the regulation, we may not be giving justice to your thoughts, your basis for formulating these regulations to that effect. So, in that perspective, please bear with us with our thoughts. There may be a dialogue thereafter, which one is correct one, which one is wrong one, and then we can go ahead for a comprehensive correct regulation. But there was one request only, as we are trying to read, analyze and present it before yourself and the other people, if those who have taken Herculean task and massive efforts to formulate that, so far it should have been a secret, it is alright. But when it is in the public domain, it will be very advantageous to all of us if you only conduct such workshop and tell us the basis of each and every aspects, so that probably 50% queries and questions which may arise in our mind will not be there. That is what is in mind. Going ahead with cluster redevelopment, everybody knows now, because brief history shows that the concept was there since March 2009, and because of the minimal response, a steering committee, a high-level steering committee, which was formulated by then CM Prithviraj Chavan sir, and then for years, year or 2 years, there were several meetings, thoughts were exchanged, interactions were made, and based on the committee's recommendation, the regulation was modified on 9 September 2004, that is very recently. So exercise was recently made. So everybody by virtue of that knows now that cluster development is a redevelopment of cluster of buildings, maybe number of plots, maybe number of buildings on a minimum area of 4,000 square meters. So going ahead with this concept that cluster development basic thoughts are known to each and everybody, I am not repeating that just for the sake of saving our time. Next slide please. I will straight away come to the plus points of the proposed modification. Yes, to some extent there were certain interactions. Based on that, really some of the lacunas have been removed even subsequent to September 2014. There were certain lacunas. There may be some few remaining which I will address subsequently. But let us go into the merits of the modification. There were a number of questions as to what I would do when my buildings are industrial shades, or for that example, industrial plots, whether I am entitled for cluster development. So the answer was not there in the last 2 regulations. Here it has been addressed to, and those buildings, except for an industry, but service industry estates, industrial galas, industrial estates qualifying the age for urban renewal are considered to be eligible buildings. That is a good thing, sir. At least there is a clarity whether to or not. Then, along with the safe buildings, other buildings of 30 years age are also eligible. But then the last regulation was saying that the eligibility will be decided as on 13 June 1996. So 13 June 1996 is the criteria for cess buildings by virtue of the formation of the Suktankar committee on that day, that time. So that norm was not correct for the other types of buildings, which has been correctly modified in your regulation, in the new regulation rather. And now the sanction plans or the assessment report saying that it is prior to 30 years and ineligible tenement. Again, the deadline for mezzanine was also 13 June 1996, but by virtue of incorporation resolution and further GR, the deadline for tolerated mezzanine is 15th August 1997, which has been incorporated in the new regulation. Next. Then, so far, there is a high wall committee for cluster redevelopment, and then there is a previous approval of the government also. The new regulation says that, and for that matter, the new regulation says that the municipal commissioner will decide about the cluster redevelopment schemes, and whenever there are public or government, semi-government plots involved in the cluster formation, there is a provision of taking that issue from municipal commissioner to high power committee to government and to an empower committee which is under chief secretary. It's a long process. So in the new regulation, it has been rightly so, the commissioner will be the final authority to take decision about whether that land should be allowed to be taken under cluster development. So this will save a lot of time, and this will save a lot of time of the committee members also, because they are all having their own jurisdiction. Then the consent of 70% of the tenants. There was again two thoughts: 70% as a whole, or per building, or per plot. So clarity has been given, rightly so. It is 70% in aggregate, but at least 50% of each plot, which is correct, so that nobody misuses the provision to evict the tenants, poor tenants. Then, for giving some incentive to tenants coming together, which is the most difficult part of cluster development, the additional entitlement which otherwise was there in the earlier regulation also has been enhanced. It was 15, 20, 25, 30% has been made to 15, 25, 35 and up to 45%. So an attempt has been made to invite the tenants of various buildings nearby to come together, if not socially, at least for their own bigger size tenement. So it has also been a good effort. Next. Provision of realignment of existing roads has been incorporated in the regulation itself. Because whenever there is a cluster redevelopment, the entire area is going to be revamped. New buildings will go, new roads will go, new roads will come. So there are various thoughts about that. So giving a clarity that such roads can be realignment within the regulation, no further permissions will be necessary, which is again a good highlight of this particular modification. Data line of tolerated structure on encroaching on the road. It was a good thought in 2014 when it was introduced, but again the bottom line was that such structure should be tolerated structure, that is prior to 60 to 64. So any structure thereafter would have been remained on the road, and the road bottom would not have been removed. So let us come to practicality. If a 112,000 slum dweller can be rehabilitated to give an ownership home, why not this, which will make the road clear for hundreds or thousands of those who are moving along the road. So it is again a good change. As I said, the municipal commission is the sanctioning authority, and also a bonus entitlement, which was to some extent was creating discretion one and confusion as to bonus is entitled only when complete in all respect proposal is submitted within a year after the LOI is given. So complete in all respect has no definition, and for that I need to submit a plan. Then plan will contain the rehab tenements. Then what I should agree with the tenant, whether I should agree bonus or not. So there was some confusion. Maybe who doesn't want bonus? So if any correct form bonus can be given, then let us think about. We will also think and come to you, sir. Next. However, by virtue of certain good changes there are certain concerning changes also. So those are, as I said, similar to the redevelopment schemes as discussed by Suyog in 33.5 or as discussed by Vertisar in 33.7. All said and done, as I initially said, our intention may be to not promote the individual plot redevelopment. Our intention may be to have a parity of open spaces, consumption of FSI, to create a good Mumbai here onwards in the next 20 to 40 years. But all said and done, sir, these things are to be done through private participation. So if those are not practically workable, whatsoever may be good thought behind that, so the model will fail and the purpose will not be resolved. So there has to be certain balance in achieving all those things. I am not saying the unlimited FSI shall be allowed, so that one building is of 200 meter height and another building is of 70 meter height. Yes, we also feel bad when we look at Mumbai from that point of view. But then, who will do that cluster redevelopment if individual redevelopment is made impossible through the regulation? The one who will find it attractive. For cluster redevelopment, the first hurdle is coming togetherness of the adjoining plot residents as well as owners. There has to be an inherent stimulation within the regulation going beyond the regular thoughts or going beyond the regular parameters. Those will have to be thought of for cluster development, because that is what only going to give us a new Mumbai, a renewed Mumbai, maybe 25 to 30 years here from now. So there has to be some attraction for people themselves to opt for cluster development. The tenant, all the stakeholders, the tenant, owner, architects, developers, all stakeholders. And for that, I have formulated these concerning changes which may have to be addressed. Formula for incentive FSI, which we have discussed. Need of handing over land to institute for public amenity space, open space requirement, and parking space requirement for rehab component. This is increasing the rehab parking spaces. Next. So, as has been discussed by two speakers, the FSI permissivity has the cap as is at par with the normal proposal, but it can be increased only for rehabilitation, but not for incentive FSI, which can be only in the form of TDR. Next. So that for such clusters to be formed, all old part of the city mostly, as we have seen 90% of the area is in 3.5 to 5 FSI zone. So the zone FSI ranges from 3.5 to 5. What was the prevailing FSI in the prevailing policy? 6.75 as per parity or analogy. Taking staircase, lift and other few of FSI together, 6.75 at least. So that is the minimum FSI available today under cluster redevelopment. I am not saying FSI should be increased. I am saying if not increased, then the schemes will not be undertaken by any private participant without having any guaranteed return to his satisfaction from the scheme. So in fact, effectively, it reduces the permissible FSI in situ for the cluster redevelopment. I know there is a hue and cry in the newspapers and media and all those things that FSI has been increased multifold, many-folds. On some plots it may have, but more or less Mumbai is there for redevelopment. Most of the plots are having old existing structures. So the model which will be applied in most of the parts will be this model. Maybe after a few years it may be there in the suburbs also. So the FSI, whether I need to increase it beyond 5 or beyond 6.5, that should not be a concerning thing. It will be the practically feasibility of that scheme should be taken into consideration, sir. Next. Actually, this is the scheme which is needed badly for whole part of the city. Now, when Subtankar committee was formed for considering the redevelopment of SES building issue, they had given a report in 1997. Next. The table shows the consumed FSI in the existing building in Island City. So they have made the city in two parts, A to D ward and then B to G south, G north. So you can see, sir, out of 9,509 buildings, almost 8,000 buildings are in category of 2 to 3, 3 to 4, or even more than 4 FSI. So look at those figures. So next, even in the rest of the wards also, but to the lesser extent. Next. That means this table shows that by virtue of today's provision which we have made, only rehabilitation will be possible within the scheme in situ. Even other than, I am giving you that table with respect to this building, but the equal age buildings of that era may be having same consumer side. So this will affect the private participation from viability aspect, and ultimately the desired cluster development will not take place. Next. This is for information that even in the redevelopment cluster development schemes, we have to give 10% plots, which we used to keep for the layout RC for the people of the cluster. Now it is to be handed over to PMC. So the only effect is that the land remained for redevelopment will get still reduced by 10%. And again, as regards the reservations, there are certain guidelines in the earlier regulations. I am not saying I want with that concession rates to be reservation developed, because we want to make a parity of so many aspects. But the related provisions is too vague, very silent on how it should be done. Say for example, a hospital reservation is there within the cluster, then 100% area base FSI has to be used for hospital. There is no relaxation. There is no relaxed parameter. Maybe for certain reservations where 50% reservation on 40% land, or the vice versa, there we may not get any further concession. But where there will be 100% reservations to be given for that cause, such things have to be cross-checked. Next. The formula, now it has been mucked up by so many. Next. I am just saying that so many aspects have to be counted now. So 1.4 times carpet area multiplication is much on lower side. We will come with the examples with you people or with the planning committee, so that the matter will be more clear. Then, as per the derivation, yes sir, as you said, we read the report, and then with that particular chapter on that page, with all logical steps, the final formula appears to be empirical. Then cost of parking providing construction of parking for rehab as well as sale you may say, sale new parking you may be selling. But for rehab, there is a construction cost. The construction cost is for the other aspects which are otherwise free. Then cost of providing transit accommodation and negotiation with tenants is taken as 50%, and it is presumed, statement is there in the report, it substitutes the land cost. That's why it has been 50% taken and no land cost has been separately taken. Next. But sir, it is not the case. When we are doing certain cluster development, MCGM and government both are demanding at 100% regular rate compensation. So if MCGM and government is demanding, then private owners may be requiring more than that. That aspect should be taken into consideration. And cost of construction of infrastructure facilities, shifting of facilities within the cluster. Next. Those have not been considered. Premiums, for example, if in a estate plot there is a transfer premium, there is an extra ground rent within the base FSI, then there may be government clearance is required for redevelopment, they charge 10% of the redevelopment rate. So those aspects have remained to be taken. Because once we decide that the expenditure for construction plus 40% profit, then all the expenditure will have to be considered. It is felt so. Next. The earlier formulas, first one was thumb rule. Next. The second one was given some kind of thought. With the more and more aggregation for the cluster, more incentive, and it was related to the ratio of ready-regular rate to construction cost also. So, with those two perspectives, the third formula should be taken care of. Yes, third formula, if it is based on plot-to-plot expenditure, it will be more universal. But then it should be more practical. Next. that I already said there needs to be an impulse for cluster development if at all we want to go ahead with this. It has to be more attractive. Next. So there are certain suggestions which for amalgamation, then there is a revenue problem, so revenue code should be amended to that effect, allowing the amalgamation of different derivative plots, otherwise cluster will not form. Then exact terms of taking the government land should be spelled out in the regulation itself, so that any 20 or 25% land to be provided for RG in any level. These were the developed mill lands. That is the only 4 pictures. So nicely developed. Next. Another 2 mills. So it is a suggestion that there has to be certain norms for providing physical RG for the layout people. Next. These are suggestions which I am during my discussion I have already. So you can proceed with for the last slide, which will be next. Which will be